Elaine did not leave.
Yeah, nice to see you again.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Did you ask the question?
Yes, I will ask you conference regarding nuclear disarmament, nuclear security.
This conference is taking place at a very crucial point in time because last month the United Nations adopted a treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons since the independence of Kazakhstan. So, in that context, see, I think the best way to have security is not to have nuclear weapons. In favor of the prohibition of nuclear weapons, they have to continue to exert their weight in different international
Бейбітшілік келісім сарайына қош келдіңіздер. Көрермендер залына өтулеріңізді және орындары.
72 years have passed. Little boy, that was the code name of the bomb that incinerated everything around in a split second. 3 days later, another atomic bomb was dropped, this time on Nagasaki. More than 450,000 people became victims of the two bombings. The cities resembled a cauldron with boiling tar, where innocent people burned. Decades have passed. But history has captured the tragedy of the war. It's a reminder of a reckless game with an incredible force of nuclear weapons. The tragedy of other people thousands of miles away from Hiroshima and Nagasaki should be remembered too. A few years later, the Soviet Union made its own nuclear bomb, and the decision was made to test its power in the Kazakh steppe. At the junction of the East Kazakhstan, Pavlodar and Karaganda regions, one of the world's largest nuclear test sites, on August 29, 1949, the Soviets conducted their first nuclear weapons test here, and there were 456 more in the next 40 years. For the record, the total power of nuclear charges tested over these years was 2,500 times higher than the power of the atomic bomb dropped. The tragedy reached a great scale and the public could not turn a blind eye to it. In 1989, the Nevada Sema International Anti-Nuclear Movement was established. The organization's goal was to close the Semipalatinsk as well as other nuclear test sites around the world. Olja Suleiman, a poet and a public figure, was the leader of the movement. Mass protests prevented 11 out of 18 explosions that were planned at the Semipalatinsk test site at the time. The movement received the support from Kazakhstan's leader, Nursultan Nazarbayev. As a result, on August 29, 1991, he issued a historic decree on closing the Semipalatinsk test. The Soviet Union collapsed. The young sovereign Kazakhstan inherited the world's fourth largest nuclear arsenal. Once again, the president of the newly independent state made the only right decision, as the country voluntarily renounced its nuclear weapons. Thus, Kazakhstan set an example in nuclear safety and arms reduction for the whole world. In 1992, the former Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi suggested that Nazarbayev should leave the nuclear arsenal in Kazakhstan so that, in his words, the Muslim world also owned a nuclear bomb. If Nazarbayev agreed, Gaddafi promised billions of dollars for the storage and maintenance of the arsenal. However, the Kazakh president, as a true statesman, was guided by strategic considerations and not the opportunism. Thus, the president of Kazakhstan resolutely adhered to the policy of non-proliferation. For instance, in 1992, the country began to implement the Cooperative Threat Reduction Program, also known as the Non-Nuclear Program. It was a vivid example of the successful multilateral cooperation in the field of disarmament with the direct participation of the two nuclear superpowers, Russia and the United States, as well as three now non-nuclear states, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, and Belarus. The program resulted in projects implemented to destroy the infrastructure and facilities for the production and storage of nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons. In 1993, the Kazakh Supreme Council ratified the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. The multilateral agreement obliges the participating countries to take practical measures to reduce the threat of weapons of mass destruction. In 2006, Kazakhstan, with the support of the neighboring Central Asian states, signed the Central Asian Nuclear Weapon-Free Zone Treaty. According to its regulations, the parties undertake to prohibit production, purchase and distribution of nuclear weapons and their components or other nuclear explosive devices. The zone in Central Asia has a number of unique features. It is the first nuclear weapon-free zone located in its entirety in the northern hemisphere and bordering two nuclear powers, Russia and China. Also, it is the first nuclear-free zone in the region where nuclear weapons existed in the past. As a result of the agreements with the leading powers, Kazakhstan acquired security guarantees, strengthened its state sovereignty, and protected itself from external threats. On Kazakhstan's initiative, in December 2009, the UN General Assembly adopted a resolution to establish the International Day Against Nuclear Tests on August the 29th, the date when the Semipalatinsk test site was closed. And in December 2015, the regular meeting of the UN General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Nuclear-Free World that was initiated by President Nursultan Nazarbayev. The adoption of the resolution once again confirmed the independent foreign policy course of the President of Kazakhstan and its positive perception in the world. In 2012, at the plenary session of the conference From the Ban of Nuclear Tests to a World Free of Nuclear Weapons, President Nazarbayev announced the launch of the ATOM project. The acronym ATOM stands for Abolish Testing, Our Mission. Within the framework of the project, anyone who opposes nuclear weapons can sign an online petition calling on the governments of the world to permanently abandon nuclear testing and to bring about an early entry into force of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. The goals of the ATOM project were clearly formulated by its honorable ambassador, Kazakh artist Karibek Kuyukov, who himself suffered the consequences of nuclear tests. The goals of the peaceful policy of Kazakhstan were summarized in the manifesto of President Nursultan Nazarbayev, The World, the 21st Century, which was presented to the public during the Nuclear Security Summit in Washington in the spring of 2016. The document is a fundamentally new global anti-nuclear and anti-war platform for long-term action. Its basic provisions on the reality of achieving a new safe world for all can become the basis of a worldwide disarmament movement and an effective roadmap for all global states for peace, disarmament, security, and scientific cooperation. The movement's founding document was the Manifesto of Russell Einstein, whereas the organization's name is connected to the venue of the first conference held in the Canadian village of Pugwash in 1957. The movement played an important role in the development and adoption of key multilateral agreements in the field of non-proliferation and elimination of the weapons of mass destruction. In 1995, the Pugwash movement was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for its active role in seeking nuclear disarmament. According to the representatives of the movement, Kazakhstan was chosen as a suitable place for holding a Jubilee meeting of scientists in 2017, as the people of Kazakhstan suffered the consequences of nuclear tests, and today, under the leadership of President Nursultan Nazarbayev, the country is a recognized leader in matters of nuclear disarmament. Kazakhstan's next step in supporting non-proliferation of nuclear weapons is hosting the Low-Enriched Uranium Bank under the auspices of the International Atomic Energy Agency. A unique project is being implemented on the grounds of the Oba Metallurgical Plant in the city of Ust-Kamenogorsk. It will enable the conditions for solving problems related to the development of peaceful atom in countries that do not have a full cycle of uranium enrichment for use in the production of power at nuclear reactors. Speaking at the 70th session of the UN General Assembly in New York in September 2015, President Nursultan Nazarbayev proposed that creating a world without nuclear weapons should be the main goal of humanity in the 21st century. In his view, it is possible to achieve this goal not later than the United Nations Centennial in 2045. According to Nazarbayev, it is necessary to create nuclear-free zones in other regions of the world, particularly in the Middle East. The nuclear powers must provide guarantees of non-use of force to all countries that have renounced the possession of nuclear weapons. To this end, the President of Kazakhstan proposed the creation of a global anti-nuclear movement. At the same time, every person on the planet can and should contribute to the struggle to ban nuclear testing, and, in the not-too-distant future, the nuclear weapons themselves. Surely, this is a very noble goal. A goal that deserves everyone's.
Welcome to the 62nd Pugwash Conference on Science and World Affairs and the 60th anniversary of the Pugwash movement. The documentary that we have just seen expresses more eloquently than I can the history of the nuclear age and efforts being made by both the nation of Kazakhstan and their leader Nazarbayev, as well as we have focused on situations where nuclear weapon states are involved in disputes so that we reduce the danger of nuclear conflict.
We are convinced that a more secure world should be built not on nuclear deterrence, but rather on international trust and cooperation. The permanent members of the UN Security Council have a key role to play in achieving this noble goal. A fair exercise of rights of all states to peacefully use nuclear energy under the strict verification by the IAEA is crucial to promoting global
Just
nuclear.
last month, 122 states joined together to adopt a historic treaty on the prohibition of the nuclear weapons. The treaty represents an important step and contribution towards the common aspiration of a world without nuclear weapons. This treaty is historic for two reasons. One, it places nuclear weapons on the same level as the chemical and biological weapons which are deemed in 1925 as incompatible with the principles of humanity. Two, it is the first multilateral treaty on nuclear disarmament in more than 20 years.
In Africa, when a baby does this, they force him to crawl for some time because they say if you don't crawl and you start walking immediately after sitting, you will not have solid legs. So that's basically what I see in nuclear disarmament. There were measures like the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty and many other international measures that were laid out that are not finished yet. So let's make sure we get those so that we prepare the solid ground for the solid leg that can be nuclear disarmament. And then we'll have something that is solid enough for eternal peace and security. By giving states confidence that the global moratorium will take place on September 20th, 2017 in New York. During the following 2 years, the co-presidents will employ a targeted approach to reach out to key decision makers in the 8 remaining Annex II states. While such direct engagement with the mentioned 8 states will continue, there is also a central role the academic community, civil society, and youth can play in supporting the entry into force of the treaty.
Follow-up. Thanks again.
I think this is a
little bit of corridor on the left side.
Yes. Do you know Marjan? Oh,
Yeah,
nice to meet you. Yeah, probably at the NPT. Thanks to you guys.
I like this call, the calling thing I like.
Horizon is possibly the election in the UK within the next 6 months, which will weaken Theresa May lose. Because the NPT was deliberately created to be vague on the issue of elimination, the ban treaty is an essential and welcome complement to the NPT.
Ban treaty, the treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons, which, as we know, was adopted last July 7 at New York. This was a major accomplishment by the international community and civil society. And it makes clear that the threat of use and the use of these weapons is unacceptable to mankind.
Certainly, as we all know, one of the main risks facing humanity as a whole. But as I say, it is also fundamental that that humanity saw also the institutional framework of the United Nations taking action on one of the main challenges that we have, and that we're not putting it aside or leaving it, postponing it for another generation.
Remember the headlines in the press only a few days ago, when you could read, "Will the war of words go nuclear? The war of words
leads to nuclear war. We as parliamentarians need to lobby and to convince our governments to do so that it may finally enter into force. Parliamentarians can also encourage the national governments to reduce the role of nuclear weapons in their strategic postures and to adopt unambiguous no first use policies. And we can advocate for the irreversible reduction of stockpiles.
I'm speaking in my former capacity as head of verification and security policy coordination at the International Atomic Energy Agency. And first of all, I would like to congratulate Ambassador Elaine for this singular achievement of hers. What Ambassador Whyte was trying to achieve is what is called the South Africa Plus model, where each of the weapon states would find ways of disarming and put the nuclear material under international verification. And this
and that is, Ambassador Whyte, Gómez, do you think that there could be achieved the 50 ratifications in time for the 2018 UN high-level conference on nuclear disarmament in September next year, and whether that would be a good way of encouraging states to ratify quickly and then have the entry into force announced at the 2018 UN high-level conference? And to Bruce, what disarmament steps do you think we could push the nuclear weapon states to make progress on for the 2018 high-level conference?
The most important reflection, and this is the reason why I mentioned at the beginning that every single social reality is composed of many different dimensions with it that interact with each other. And that the mandate that the GA granted the conference with was a very specific and very focused with dealing with the prohibition of the high standards towards the entry into force and the ratification. It is very interesting that you can see, I mean, if you see the movement and you see the process, the political process of that led to the whole
complex of factors now that both Russia, particularly Russia, but also the United States and China take into account in assessing where they could, what direction and how far they can go on nuclear arms reductions. And that, besides ADM, there's also conventional precision-guided munitions, of which the United States has an amazing sort of juggernaut, anti-satellite weapons, cyber warfare weapons. There's a whole complex.
To me, there are 2 points which I would like to mention here. One is sort of imbalance existed in the Middle East, and a sort of a balance existed in the sub-region of the Persian Gulf.
Over the years, though, what we have witnessed is that successive and various nuclear weapon-free zones have been established in various parts of the world. Notwithstanding that, as I mentioned, over 40 years, the goal of establishing the Middle East nuclear weapon-free zone has been sought after, but so far never realized.